fitness business nerds, what's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. Today, I'm very excited to have Julian Barnes here, who is the co-founder and CEO of Boutique Fitness Solutions. Julian, I've known for a few years now. Actually, I spoke a while ago at one of your summits, but I haven't seen you in the longest time, so I'm so excited to catch up today. Thanks for being here, Julian.
Well, thanks for having me, Michael. And yes, you and Mark were speakers at the inaugural Boutique Fitness Summit in New York in 2018. And world's a little different now, isn't it?
It feels like forever ago. It feels like
It
forever ago.
literally feels like forever ago. But thanks for having me here. Big fan, of you and Mark, and really glad to be here.
Yeah, well, BFS has been busy since then. You all have been growing so much. So for our listeners who maybe haven't heard of BFS yet, can you just talk a little bit about what you do and what you're up to these days?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'd like to start by identifying BFS as the premier peer network and business education provider for group-based fitness studios. So what that means is half of our business is like YPO or EO or Chief, those cohort-led roundtable discussions with studio owners, executives, and managers at similar levels, meeting monthly to engage in collaborative learning, to share best practices, insights, resources with each other. That's half of our business. The other half is training and development programs for less experienced studio owners, their managers, and their teams. And we've recently begun working with some enterprise brands like SoulCycle and Title Boxing that have hired us to come in and create some customized programs for them. So we are all about educating, connecting, and empowering business owners and decision makers to help them launch, manage, and scale their business. That's what we do at BFS.
Amazing. Well said, my friend. And thank you for doing it. I think, as a young industry, I think we need more organizations like you bringing us together, helping us learn from one another, helping us, represent ourselves better as an industry, helping us do more with less sometimes during hard times. So thank you for the important work you're doing. One of the things that, aside from your summits, which are fantastic conferences that listeners you should go to, we'll tell you more about that later probably. The other thing I'm a big fan of that you all do is you do these state of the industry reports that are so well done. Not only are they well researched, but they're also well presented, available for free on your website, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
And so, yeah, so I'm such a huge fan because I think one of the things that, myself as a little bit of a research nerd really, wrings my hands about from time to time is that we're also an industry with very little data. We have very little data about what we do. It's hard to get good information about what we do as an industry. And your State of the Industry report does a really great job of giving us access to well-researched information about what's going on. And at the time of releasing this podcast, you will have just put out, I think, what you're calling the Fall State of the Industry report. Is that right?
It is the Fall 2022 Studio Owner Survey, and we've decided that we're going to start publishing this quarterly. We used to publish the State of the Industry annually at our summit before COVID. And then, as we know, things changed so quickly during the pandemic, we had to publish the State of the Industry twice a year. And now that we are at various stages of emerging from the pandemic, facts on the ground are still changing so quickly that we think it's important for the entire industry to know what's happening on a quarterly basis. So we'll do this again in the winter, in the spring, in the summer. So this is the Fall 2022 Studio Owner Survey.
Exciting. That's so great. And I'm sure let's dive in because you just start by talking about who did you survey and maybe what are some of the things that stood out to you in the results you've looked through so far.
Great. So we surveyed 250 studio owners in the United States, Canada, Hong Kong, the UK, and I believe Costa Rica. So 32 states were represented. All modalities were represented, but especially the modalities that you would expect. So that would be, let me see here quickly. That would be yoga, strength training, Pilates, cycling, bar, all modalities, 32 states. So it was, and all three DMAs, so city, suburban, rural. So we think it's
Hmm.
a good representation of the industry. The first question we asked was their number one business objective for the rest of the year.
Mm.
And overwhelmingly, oh, by the way, the majority of these studios are group fitness based. Probably 80% group fitness based, 20% private sessions. So private sessions could be either strength training, personal training gyms, or it could be Pilates studios that do a lot of private sessions as well. So 80% group fitness based.
Got it.
First question we asked was their number one objective that they wanted to accomplish by the end of this year. And overwhelmingly, 60% said increasing membership. And that
Hmm.
aligns with the group fitness-based business model. So everyone's clear on what they're trying to focus on. Second question we asked was their top three business challenges. So different
Mm.
from business objective, what are their top three business challenges? And these answers have not changed in 18 months. You
Yeah.
could probably guess, you're nodding your head because you know what they are. It is client acquisition, client retention,
Hmm.
and developing a growth strategy.
Yeah.
Those are the top three challenges. What's missing from there, which I'm glad to hear or glad to see wasn't on there, is trying to return to 2019. I think people are
Sure.
starting to move away from the notion of comparing themselves to 2019 and looking at where they are now. So where they are now is they need more clients. They need to keep their existing clients, and they are trying to develop a growth strategy. And it's that last one that I think is quite fascinating because it suggests an acknowledgement by the survey respondents that the world has shifted,
Hmm.
and what used to work pre-pandemic doesn't necessarily work. I mean, I've had many studio owners tell us that the plans that they know worked well pre-pandemic no longer work for them.
Yeah.
And so my interpretation of the answer, trying to develop a growth strategy, is that's half of the statement. The full statement, if we had a longer sentence, would have been trying to develop a new growth strategy in this new environment where everything is shifted and we need to figure out what works again. That's essentially what I think the respondents were saying.
Yeah, yeah, great summary, Julian. And I think that that also tracks with what I'm hearing with our clients at Business Unicorns is that it's more clients in the door, get the clients to stay longer. And I'm not sure how to grow this thing. And I think you're right that a lot of this, a lot of the same context is what I think is going on as well, which is what used to work is just not working the same anymore, or to the same extent. The one that maybe I'm curious to know if this fell on your list at all is, did anyone mention hiring? Because I've seen that be also kind of a big trend is hiring. But I guess if people are struggling to grow, maybe they don't need to hire as much. But I know that hiring has been at the tip of the tongue of all of our clients for the last 6 months.
So we thought that would be, let me pause for a second.
Yeah,
It's fascinating to see to see the difference between the answers people recorded in the survey and what they talk about in our mastermind meetings.
oh sure,
Because
yeah.
if you had asked me based upon the last year of conversations what the answers were, I would have said sales
Mm-hmm.
and hiring,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what people talk about.
Yep.
But that's not what they included in the survey.
Fascinating.
So number 4 on the survey was hiring instructors. And we
Got it.
broke up hiring into the different functions.
Sure.
So hiring instructors was number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Hiring front desk was number 8, and hiring managers was number 9.
Mm,
Now that is totally inconsistent with the weekly email I receive from a studio owner asking for a referral for a general manager candidate.
sure.
But
Yeah.
when given a
When
chance,
surveyed, it's
when
interesting.
surveyed, they ranked at 9th, but my email inbox says it's like number 2.
Yeah, amazing. Well, let's talk a little bit about solutions to those top three. So when you're talking to some of your mastermind clients right now, and working through their challenges, what kind of things are you finding are working for them in terms of getting more people through the door and retaining the people longer? What are your kind of top strategies these days?
This is the answer no one wants to hear because everyone's looking for the equivalent of the weight loss pill. And
Yep.
we know there's no weight loss pill. And
Hmm.
so we've been talking about this for the entire year. In our state of the industry from June 2022, we said takeaway number one, return to client building basics. And that is still the case 5 months later. What do we mean by client building basics? Well, if you accept our premise that the golden era of boutique fitness was 2014 to 2019,
Mm.
that era is gone. And that era, one of two things happened. Either we didn't have to sell because there was so much natural demand for our services. And I say we, I mean the industry,
Yep.
or we never learned how to sell because you could just put a sandwich board on the street. People walked in, people who worked at your front desk were order takers, not
Yep.
salespeople. And I don't
Yep.
mean that disparagingly. I mean their job requirement didn't, their job responsibility did not require them to sell. They just simply took people's orders for a 10-pack, a 5-pack, or a membership. Those days don't exist anymore.
They're gone.
They're gone. So everybody has to sell. And when I say everybody, I should say everybody has a role in the client acquisition process. I don't mean the instructor is on the phone, calling clients, but I mean the
Yep.
experience that the instructor is delivering, recognizing the new member in front of class, talking to the trial member at the end of class, walking that trial member back to the front desk for the handoff. Everyone has a role in the sales process. And I guess it's fortunate and unfortunate. It's fortunate that during the golden era, the industry was doing so well that we never developed the sales muscle. It's unfortunate that now we as an industry have to learn the basics. And by the basics, I am literally talking the basics of understanding, training your front desk team to understand that any inbound contact, notice I'm using the word contact, I'm not
Hmm.
saying lead or prospect. I'm saying any inbound contact is a prospect. It's on any platform and for any question. So if a person is contacting you, asking you, what are your hours today? That is a prospect. Capture their contact information, put them in your CRM, nurture them. It is such a simple thing to do, and yet there's so many studios that are still not doing the basics. So any contact on any platform, IG DM, Facebook DM, a chat box on your chat bot on your website homepage, a phone call, an email. If someone's taking the time out of their busy schedule to contact you and ask you a question that doesn't sound like a sales question, guess what? That is a sales question. Take the
Hmm.
opportunity to cultivate and nurture a relationship with that person, put them in your sales funnel. I hope you have a sales funnel. So you're using combination of email, text, phone, contact, reach outs, invite the person to your facility, focus on their employ active listening, focus on their objectives. Don't sell features and benefits. Don't sell your new kettlebells, your new TRX. Talk to them about why they're here, why they contacted you, and then show them that you have the prescription to help them achieve their goals. Back to client building basics. It's nothing new. There's nothing there that's original. There's nothing there that's BFS copyrighted. We're just reminding people of what they have probably already forgotten.
Yeah, well said, Julian. I think it's a great summary of the basics, and I think anyone who's ever been an elite anything was really excellent at the basics. And I think if you want to be an elite studio owner of any kind, you got to be good at the basics of marketing and selling.
Well, I'm glad you used that word elite because um, I'm a huge fan of studying elite performers.
Hmm.
And whether it's an athlete or a performer, LeBron James and Tiger Woods and Tom Brady practice every
Mm,
day. Have
that
they
too.
have they
Yep.
forgotten how to hit a jump shot or how to hit a golf ball? No. So why are they practicing? To stay sharp, hone their skills. And if you're a performer, Wynton Marsalis, Beyonce, Rihanna are practicing their vocal cords, practicing their scales. Elite performers practice, and sales requires the same type of practice and repetition. So if your front desk is rolling their eyes, I already know this. Why are we doing this again? For the same reason that Beyonce is practicing her vocal cords every day, the same reason that, you know, the great performers are practicing their music instruments. You don't ever stop practicing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great analogy. It's, every dancer at the American Ballet Theater gets up every morning and takes ballet class.
Right.
They don't just practice the show. They get up and they get at that bar and they do the basics, do the same exercises, or mainly the same exercises that a 8-year-old is doing in ballet class every day.
Every day. And you'll see them in New York City. You'll see Broadway performers at Broadway
Hmm.
Dance,
Yep.
at Steps on Broadway, and they're
Yep.
taking classes with the regular people. We
Yeah.
have trainers in New York City that go to trainer workouts. So this notion of practice and rehearsal, I think, needs to be incorporated in business practices as well.
Yeah, well said. I'll just +1 underscore that, shout that from the rooftops that there has to be some practice. And people think role playing in business in meetings and things is so cheesy, but it is essential. If you can't find a way to effectively role play with your team, important conversations like client conversations, sales conversations, how you handle that incoming phone call, even practicing how you handle conflict and customer complaints. All of those things make you better at handling it. So yeah, well said, Julian. Let's press on. I know what the second challenge on the list, and we won't probably go through all of these in the same detail, but still, I want to talk a little bit about retention, how to keep people around these days. I will say this: one of the things that I'm hearing these days is that because so much of fitness went online during COVID, people are feeling a sense of competition even more, and not competition from the brick and mortar studio down the street, but competition from all the choices that our clients have these days. And a lot of people I'm here talking to are blaming that on their retention challenges.
There's the key word,
Yes.
blaming.
Yeah.
You just hit my hot button topic.
Good.
I have zero tolerance for fitness industry professionals who think that their competitor is the other fitness industry professional across the street.
Hmm.
That is not your competition. Your competition is Netflix. Your competition is the couch. Your competition is inertia. With
Hmm.
75% of the US population, according to US government, not getting the required 150 minutes of exercise every week. Let me say that again. With 75% of Americans not getting 150 minutes of moderate exercise every week, that means three-quarters of every 3/4 of everyone you pass on the street, on the sidewalk, on the highway is not moving enough. There are 330 million Americans. Knock out the 100 million that are probably below age 18. That's 230 million Americans, 75% of them. So let's just say easy math. 165 million Americans are not moving sufficiently, consistently enough. Why are we competing with each other
Hmm.
for a pool of 165 million people?
Hmm.
Get out there in the neighborhood, become evangelical, and by that I mean sing from the rooftop the praise, the benefits of your community, of your program, and understand that if you're a strength training studio, then someone may not be interested in strength training, interested in bar, Pilates, cycling, etc. And that's okay. But there are enough people in that 165 million for you to find the 500 or 1,000 that you need to run a profitable business. So
Hmm.
instead of looking at that business across the street from you as competition, and I don't mean if there's an F-45 and Orange Theory next door that you can cooperate with them. They probably are your competition.
Sure.
But I'm saying if there is another modality around the corner, partner versus co-op versus think of them as competition. And more importantly, focus on the fact that 75% of the people who work and live in your neighborhood are not moving enough. And then to quote the late Stephen Tharrett, the author of the textbook Fitness Management, he talked about the consumer personas, right? So the 17% of the population that are hardcore enthusiasts, you, me, Fisher, people who can't imagine living without exercise. We're 17% of the population. Most fitness providers are searching for hardcore enthusiasts. I'm not leaving my gym. I like my gym. So that's a tough sell. But Stephen Tharrett talked about the next dynamic persona, which is the uninitiated believers at 63%. So if you take that 165 million who are not exercising, right? So us hardcore enthusiasts are in the 25%. So 165 million, 63% of those people know that exercising is important. They just haven't found something that something that they love enough to commit to. So here's where my math falls off. 60% of 165 million. So 16, 32, 48, 96 million.
Yep.
But 96 million people are looking for something to do, moving their body that they can fall in love with. With that many people, why are we talking about competition versus the gym across the street?
Yeah, it's a great point, Julian. I'm so glad you broke that down for everyone, because the reality is in most markets, there are plenty of fish in the sea, right? There are plenty of people who need and maybe don't want it yet, but need our help. and
Well, and that's
and
why the 63% is important. Those
yep,
are the
those
people who
people already know.
acknowledge,
Yeah.
yes, they say they know they should do more,
Yep.
they haven't found something that they love. And so that's the challenge for the fitness provider. Are you creating an experience that the person who's walking in for the first day loves? Do you have every member of your team involved in that recruiting process so that no one in your team ever says, quote, that's not my job, unquote? Because everyone, from the cleaning person to the front desk person to the instructor to the manager, everyone understands that their job is to deliver a premium experience to everyone who comes in your doors, regardless of whether they're a free trial person, a lapsed person coming back, or regular. Everyone needs to receive and experience a high level, high touch premium experience. And if you do that, retention takes care of itself because you've converted those people into ambassadors who are wearing your t-shirts, who are posting about the great workout they had at your facility on their IG. It's just return to client building basics. This isn't rocket science. And again, there is nothing that I'm sharing with you that is a Julian Barnes or BFS original concept. These are the tried and true concepts of building and managing small businesses that have been proven over time. We've just forgotten about them.
Yeah. Well said, my friend. Well said. Let's move on, because I know there was another thing that stood out in your fall report, which is I think we were going to talk a little bit about
Profitability.
profitability, some common characteristics of profitable studios. So yeah, talk a little bit about this. What was the question in the survey?
So we asked the survey respondents if the simple question for year to date 2022, are you profitable, unprofitable, or break even? And 43% are profitable. 23% are break even, and 34% are below profitable. So essentially 66% are break even or profitable. I think that's encouraging. It's encouraging if you add it to the other report that came out last week. So end of first week of November, The payroll processing company ADP reported that there were about 200,000 new jobs created in the month of October, and the vast majority of those new jobs were in the leisure hospitality sector, which is where fitness falls in for government economic purposes. We're in the leisure hospitality sector. So all these new jobs created in face-to-face industries supports the fact that the industry is growing. 66% of the respondents being at least break even and 43% being profitable. I say those are positive trends that studios are returning to profitability, well-run studios implementing some of the things that we've discussed today.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the fact. The interesting revelation is we looked at the characteristics of the profitable studios and all the other studios in the survey to see if there was one or two, maybe three things that were unique about them. Maybe they pay higher salaries, maybe there was a certain modality, maybe they were in a specific market from urban, rural. And guess what the answer was, Michael?
I wonder.
The most profitable studios, or I should say, the profitable studios had the same exact characteristics as unprofitable. And so at first, our team was perplexed and a little disappointed by that. But it led to a really interesting conversation internally about, well, what are the drivers of profitability? And again, it's one of those topics where people are looking for the equivalent of the fat loss pill.
Sure.
And in fact, there isn't a fat loss pill. So when we looked at some of the studios that are profitable, and we know probably half of them, we know them well, we know about them, so we could analyze them. Again, no surprise to your listeners. The number one driver of profitability probably is your lease. Right? So
100%. Yeah, we've talked a ton on this podcast about our business. You make or break your profit margin when you sign your lease. So, not a surprise at all, right?
Yeah. So we had this conversation on one of our mastermind teams a couple weeks ago, and we asked everyone how much they were paying in their monthly lease, and the ranges were from $4,000 a month in a small town Northern California to $7,500 a month in Brooklyn, which was surprising to people, to $14,000 a month for a studio in Union Square, New York City, to $27,000 a month for a studio on 14th Street, just 3 blocks away from the studio paying $14,000.
Yeah.
And then in Texas, there's a member who owns her building and has a mortgage of $7,500. So in one team. And by the way, all those studios I mentioned are profitable. But the business with the $4,000 a month lease has the lowest revenue total of the 5, but has the highest profit margin at 62% EBITDA. Why? Because he's paying $4,000 a month in rent. So you want to look at your profitability, start with that.
Yep.
And then look at your labor. How much are you paying your team, right? You got to pay your team. We're not suggesting you should cut corners there, but that is your second biggest driver. And then the third driver of profitability is your pricing model, right? So if you're in the strength training or personal training business and you're charging $250, $300 an hour, guess what? You're going to be more profitable, right?
Surprise.
So, surprise, right? So I'm not suggesting that every business out here should be at the premium level, charging a premium price. But at least those 2 businesses I mentioned that had the highest rent, fortunately, they're also charging the most for their sessions because they recognize they have a significant rent obligation and they price their services accordingly.
Yeah. When you look at those profitable businesses, Julian, do they suggest any sort of percentage benchmarks? The ones that were profitable, was their rent a certain percentage of their revenue, as an example? Or
we haven't conducted that deep dive
Got
yet.
it. Got it.
We would actually need to sit down with some of them and create some case studies, which perhaps we should do.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
so
that's the number one question, right? As coaches and consultants that we always get is, well, how much should I spend on rent? Well, it depends on how much money you're making, how much money the space can make. So it
right,
relies on how much you're charging and how, it's a big equation, but everyone's always looking for that quick benchmark. And it's not
take it
always
to
as
the next
simple as
level.
that. Yeah.
It's also a function of who your clients are.
Hmm.
You can't charge 300 an hour for personal training if you don't have clients who can afford 300 an hour.
Yep.
So uh, the owner I mentioned, who's in Northern California with $4,000 a month in rent, is in a college town selling kickboxing classes to mostly college age women and recent college grads. And he's only charging them, I think, $99 a month.
Hmm.
He's profitable with a 62% EBITDA. He knows his market. He's offering them something that's fun for them at a price they can afford. That $99 a month can't work if your rent is $27,500.
Yep.
Right?
It's enabled by that rent number. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I just want to, emphasize this again. You can only charge what your target audience
Hmm.
can afford. So when you're looking at that lease, get a look at that neighborhood. And the technical term is demographic was DMA, demographic market analysis. Look at the businesses, the schools. Look at
You can easily find the average household income online,
correct,
so that's all you
correct,
really need to say, okay, well, how much could a family who lives in this area, who bought these houses,
afford,
what can they afford? Yeah,
correct.
it's a great tip.
So the pricing, the lease, um, and then the other factor there. So those are factors you can control. You can control your lease. You can control your pricing. You can control your labor. And then there are factors beyond your control,
Hmm.
right? And largely we're talking about work from home. And if you signed a lease across the street from a huge office building that's now sitting empty, you can't control that.
Yep.
You can only control how you respond to that.
Yeah.
So we have some members in downtown San Francisco, in downtown Chicago,
Hmm.
in uh, Madison Square Park of New York City, right across from the Credit Suisse building, which, for those of you listening, imagine an entire New York City block, one building occupied by one company, and
Hmm.
you had a studio 2 blocks from that building. Now the building is sitting 90% empty.
It was
It's
like
not your
it's like a city within a city, a
correct.
big building like that. Yeah.
Right. So it's not your fault if that building is sitting empty.
Hmm.
But it's also not an excuse to say, woe is me, I'm not doing as well because people are working from home. There are still, in that very specific neighborhood, and you know where I'm talking about, Madison
Yep.
Square Park, 25th and Madison, there are still multiple CVS's,
Hmm.
multiple Dwayne Reeds. There is Italy, this massive restaurant by Mario Batali, not even a restaurant, complex with like multiple restaurants in one complex. Um, there's
There's still a million people within walking distance.
a couple schools in that
Yeah.
area, right?
Right.
Empire. So the point is, you may have to change your target
Yeah,
audience,
exactly.
but there's still people who are walking by that neighborhood. So maybe you lost the Credit Suisse people, but are you offering services for all those restaurant workers who
Hmm.
stand on their feet all day long and repetitive use injuries? Are you offering services to all those new buildings that have opened and all those tenants? So again, fully acknowledge, can't control something like work from home, but you can control how you respond to work from home. And I like to, I know we're running out of time here. I like to
That's
just
okay.
remind people of something we said in our State of the Industry 6 months ago, and it remains even more true today. Um, People often talk about often quote Darwin's survival of the fittest.
Hmm.
And I don't think they read the entire quote, because my understanding of the quote is it's not that he said um, it's survival of the fittest is those who are most adaptable
Yes.
to change. And that's the point. The
Yes.
70% of this industry that survived the pandemic were business owners whose teams were able to adapt to new circumstances. And that's where we are now. We have new circumstances, new challenges. It aligns very closely with that first answer to the question, top 3 business challenges,
Hmm.
finding a new business strategy. We have to be adaptable to the new reality. If Credit Suisse closed, then go to the restaurants, or the Baruch literally is a block away. Baruch College, part of City
Uh-huh.
College of New York, is a block away from Credit Suisse. They didn't close.
Yeah.
Teachers, students, professors. So we have to continue as an industry to be adaptable, which is not to deny that we were the largest industry, not to be provided relief from the government. We acknowledge all that stuff, and yet that ship has sailed. The reality is we can only control what we can control. So get out into your neighborhood, become evangelical, be like a political candidate, kiss babies, shake hands, make sure that everyone in your neighborhood knows who you are, create collaborative partnerships with people you would have previously thought were your competitors, because they're not your competitors, unless literally it is the facility doing the exact same thing you're doing. Everyone other than them, they're potential strategic partners, and cooperation versus competition.
Yeah. That's a great note to end on, Julian. I think it makes so much, it's so smart to reframe this moment as a moment to be adaptive, to reimagine yourself in your market, to make new connections, make sure everyone knows you exist. And all the things that happened to us and for us during COVID, it happened already. It's
Right.
the ship has sailed. I think you gave some beautiful examples of how just kind of reimagine maybe who your avatar is, how you connect with your local community. I think those are great tips for people moving forward. So thank you for today's conversation. We could keep going. There's a million more things we could cover, so I'll have to have you back at some point soon to talk more. But can you tell everyone, how to learn more about BFS? How do they find the report that we talked about today? Where can they go online and learn more about you?
So go to our very long domain name, boutiquefitnesssolutions.com, and you'll find everything there about our mastermind programs, our training and development programs. If you're only interested in the fall survey, you can go to BFS State of the Industry.com. You can find us on Instagram at boutique FIT solutions, and you can find me on LinkedIn, Julian A. Barnes.
Fantastic. That's amazing, Julian. Listeners, go follow all those places. BFS is putting out amazing content these days. It's all well researched. They have amazing tips and tools that are free on their website. So go check them out. You're amazing. Your business is amazing. You guys are doing great work. I'm just so appreciative of it, Julian. So thank you so much.
Michael, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and your audience today. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Listeners, if you want to hear more content like this, leave us a review. Let us know that you like the podcast, and shoot me an email, michael@businessunicorns.com. Let me know who you want me to talk to next and what topics you want me to cover. Thanks again, Julian. See you all on the next one.
Thanks, Michael.
Before you go, one final note. If you haven't checked out my YouTube channel yet, head to markfisheryoutube.com. I post videos twice per week, and I cover all sorts of topics and tips to help you be even more successful at running a training gym. From time management to financial benchmarks to lead generation strategies, I have got you covered. Thanks in advance for subscribing and sharing with your training gym owner friends. My mission is to get this content out to every gym owner in the world, so your help means so much to me. Remember, that's markfisheryoutube.com. See you there.